Well, when will the rut begin this year? It's a really important topic, and to me there's some signs in the woods that let you know that the rut has begun. And you're going to find it does start at the same time every year, but boy, there's some different signs, and depending on what's going on in your area, you could see a drastic change from one year to the next, and that signifies, people will assume that that means something to do with the moon or something to do with the weather, whatever it is, but rest assured the rut will begin, and we'll talk about how you can identify it and how that'll affect your hunt this year. First off though, this is my workbench, and I say my workbench, but this is my buddy Aaron's father's, and so it has special meaning. When Aaron has a big enough pole building garage someday, he'll stick that in there, and it has a lot of meaning to him. So I appreciate being able to use it for the time, and for that, when we're moving into a new place, there's a lot of junk floating around, a lot of things, and it was kind of cool. I was looking at some of the things that meant a lot to me. You know, going back 10, 15 years, I always carried a judo point. This is a judo point right here. It's got these little springy arms. I loved carrying it in the woods if I wanted to shoot a grouse or shoot at a grouse, rabbit, small game, squirrel, whatever it might be. This was my head of choice, this little judo point. I think there's wiki judo points back in the day. But I have a lot of like keepsakes here, neat things that meant a lot to me. This is just an old arm guard. It's all faded. I don't know how old this is, but I had a bow a while back. It was a long time ago, probably 15 years ago, that would kick a little bit. I think it was called a Matthews Signature. So we're going back into the late 90s probably. And I would wear this arm guard. It would bounce off that. So something that's been in a bow case for years, and it's still ending up here. Really trying to get into Luminox this year. And so we've been practicing with those, sighting in my bow with those. So I'm looking forward to using that. And of course, my Scott grip release, very important here. And old arrows that I have. This is a really cool retrieval system from Matthews for the new bows, but silent connect system. You just loop that around the end of the limbs right here, and there's a great post to put that on. You know, we have lots of junk in here, old Knox. I have some heavy arrows, some ultra heavy arrows I'm gonna do some tests with and show them how much they drop from 35 to 40 compared to another arrow. It's more than double, by the way. Old tree step, just random, laying here. There were a time where I had over 400 of these in the woods in several states for my tree stands, and that's how we used to get into stands, unfortunately unsafe. You can see I have a couple of things of bourbon right here. That's from Kentucky, my last Kentucky trip. And so this is starting, we're trying to organize it a little bit. I have a bow arm that I'm bringing out tonight, but I love all this stuff, and I can't wait to make this into a workbench and really to have this to really focus on once we get into this special time of the year in the rut, focusing on the rut and making sure that I take advantage of the rut and that I know when it starts, and when it does start and I go ahead to a stand like we are tonight for a pre-rut sit, then I want the best chance possible that I worked hard for. A lot of the stuff on this bench has to do with that, and I'll make sure that I have a great chance when I do head to the woods this fall. When will the rut start in your area? One of the first signs that you can tell the rut has started is if you have water holes. Bucks do not typically hit water holes when it's hot. They typically hit water holes on the way from their bedding areas to an afternoon food source. It becomes a daily ritual. They sit dry all day eating twigs, hardwood regeneration, acorns, briar tips. They work up a thirst, they hit water, they go to an evening food source. When suddenly bucks start hitting, and especially during those colder days, usually we're seeing this at 40 degrees, 40 when it's October 20th, 22nd, 23rd, 27th, depending on what state you're in. Towards the end of October, if you're a little bit further south, then you see those bucks hitting the water sources during the morning hours, midday, and that's a sure sign that the rut's begun because they're active and they're moving a lot and they work up a thirst, even if it's cold, and then they're going to hit that water. If it's really hot, they're just not moving around. So really you need to gauge it on those nice, cool mornings right around those last 10 days of October, and that'll be a sure sign. Second, when you have cell cameras, when you have trail cameras, doesn't matter if you're on public or private land, when you start to see bucks using funnel areas, cruising areas, where they're traveling sideways. What I mean by sideways is they're not traveling perpendicular, for example, from a bedding area to a food source or to the end of a food source. They're traveling sideways. What I mean by that is you have a couple back bedding areas that they would have otherwise just gone straight to and then straight back to that food source. But all of a sudden you see bucks traveling between those bedding areas during the daylight. So when you see bucks cruising between bedding areas during the daylight, then you know the rut has started, because they have no reason to do that at any other time of the year, other than maybe a midnight summer walk where they're just telling you, hey, I'm going to be back in this location during the rut and you can shoot me here. So you need to plan on that. So water hole use and then cruising between bedding areas are two sure signs. You have to really avoid the signing phase, which is that phase right before the pre-rut begins. When the pre-rut begins, again, bucks are cruising between bedding areas, they're hitting water sources during the daylight. The signing phase, that's when bucks are leaving a lot of rubs and scrapes under the cover of darkness. They're giving you the illusion, they're giving you that temptation to get into the woods, and it's really not time for the rut to begin yet. They're starting to express a little bit of rut activity, but the pre-rut to me officially begins when bucks are cruising between morning bedding areas. And those are some of the times when my whitetail dreams have been made. About half my best bucks have been shot during that last 7 to 10 days of October. Half of my oldest bucks, biggest bucks, and they're bucks that were cruising between bedding areas, morning spots in stand locations they otherwise now would have not been in the rest of the year. When will the rut begin in your area? The pre-rut begins when they're cruising in southern Michigan, southern Minnesota, Wisconsin, central Minnesota, over into central Michigan, northern Pennsylvania, New York. You can expect rutting daylight activity by mature bucks to take place on the 22nd, 25th, 27th of October if you have good weather conditions, meaning if it's cool. Doesn't mean it has to be no wind, but a little bit of difference in wind. It's not hard raining out, pouring. It was snowing and raining in the stand this morning, and we did see a nice 3-year-old 10-point go by right at daybreak. But we didn't see that cruising activity we were hoping for, and they were weather suppressed. So really it has to be a good weather time. So for you in those locations, about that time. When you get into early November, first 5 days of November, that would be more like southern Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, over into southern Illinois, into Tennessee, over into Oklahoma, southern Iowa, into Missouri, Kansas. That's going to be more the pre-rut beginning in early November sometime, when bucks are, again, actually cruising between bedding areas. So think about that timing as it relates to where you want to hunt in those morning bedding areas. I keep mentioning morning bedding areas because, again, about 75% of my bucks have been killed in morning bedding area locations throughout the years. And that's even looking at my top 50 bucks, let alone other bucks even during the rut. Morning bedding areas, those are my favorite tree stand locations. And bucks are moving about 3 times longer during those times. The cool thing about the rut, it begins at the same time every single year. The pre-rut will begin at the same time when bucks are moving between bedding areas. That being said, and that understanding there, one great difference between one year and the next, the weather works itself out. If you're looking at that last 10 days of October, there's going to be a cold front in there. It doesn't matter if it's a drop from 60 to 45 or 45 to 30. Whatever the temperature is at that time, the deer will cue and key on those extreme temperature changes. But you have to have a mature buck. And that's part of it. You know, I fully believe in hunt cast because I helped build it from what's in my head. So when I see hunt cast now and HuntWise's app, their weather prediction app, then what I see in the weather and the predictions I've been making for a dozen years, that's what I see on that hunt cast. But even if there's a perfect day during that time, you have to have a mature buck in the area. You have to pick the right tree stand. You have to pick the right tree stand for the wind in your approach. There's a lot of other factors that take place. I see people say, boy, this was a perfect day. I saw tons of deer. Or how come it was a perfect day? I didn't see any. Well, you got to pick the stand. You got to have deer there. And that especially applies to the pre-rut. Because if you don't have mature bucks on or around your land and close by, what I call core bucks, I've been calling them core bucks for a long time, then you're not going to see that pre-rut activity because mature bucks lay down many times more sign, a lot more sign than young bucks do. And so if you don't have a lot of sign in your area, you're not seeing that rutting activity, that doesn't mean it hasn't begun somewhere else. And that's why people miss the rut. Pretty easy to miss the rut when you're waiting for the pre-rut to begin, you don't have any old bucks. All of a sudden you go into the rut lockdown, you're not seeing bucks because they're not moving that much. You're getting the peak rut, you're waiting for a buck to come over from someone else's property, you don't see it, you hunt on some bad weather days and you're saying, man, the rut hasn't begun in my area. Not only has the rut begun, but it's already been through the pre-rut, the rut lockdown. Now we're 10 to 14 days in, you're waiting for it to begin and it already started 2 weeks ago. If you hunt with that understanding, then that'll make you choose the right stands to go into during the peak rut. You're waiting for a buck to come from someone else's property. You're waiting for a buck to come off their first or second doe during the rut lockdown and then head your way. You're hunting those transition areas. Always ask yourself, would a mature buck be caught out in the open in this location? If it's secure, remote, and they can travel through, that's going to be a good spot to hunt. So think about it. The rut will begin again at the same time in your location every single year. You have to have bucks. You have to choose whether you're hunting a core buck and you can hunt them early in the pre-rut, maybe even during the October lull, or you're hunting that non-core buck that's coming from a mile or 2 miles away under the cover of darkness, and you need to hunt him during the peak rut. You have to choose the best stand location, the wind, obviously, all of that. Again, think about the timing in your area as it relates to some of those ingredients. I want to make sure that you're actually recognizing when the pre-rut begins in your area. Hunt with the understanding it's the same time every year. Don't go by those rut watches online because they're so subjective from one area to the other. You could have the rut beginning 2 miles away and someone says it's not beginning here 2 miles this way because they have core bucks over there. We don't have core bucks. Maybe we don't have cameras in the right location. Maybe we're not seeing that sign in our area. If you hunt with the confidence that the rut begins at the same time every year and you understand when to hunt certain stands during the pre-rut, rut lockdown, peak rut, post-rut, even the secondary rut, then you're going to be able to enjoy your rut. We have a video coming out, why your rut hunt stinks this year, and we'll go over all the negatives for how you can spoil a rut. But if you recognize when it begins every year, you're going to be on track. I want you to be on track this fall. I want to hear about it in the comments below. If you love these strategy videos and you haven't subscribed, we're over 600 now and counting. We're hoping to make them for many years to come. Hope you like them. Bottom line is, I want them to help you find success this fall, whether you're hunting the rut lockdown, the October lull, late season, gun season, whatever it is, we're going to have a strategy for you that applies to the specific period and phase of the deer season that you're in right now. Well, if you made it to the end of this video, you're obviously interested in Whitetail Habitat Solutions, what I have to teach, and you will love my new web class series. The first one is how to design your whitetail property. It's out now. The link is in the description. I invite you to check it out. It's on my website. Can't wait to hear about it.